Okay, good morning. So the winter arrived, right?
With a vengeance.
Yeah, eventually. So we have a debt from it's not belongs specifically to chapter 2, but I said I'm going to speak about it now. Well, we say that generally in Sefer Shoftim, we are facing three failures. The first is in the three most important fundamentals of Am Israel, which is Am Israel, the nation, Torah Israel, the Torah, of course, and Eretz Israel, the land of Israel. The failure about Am Israel is we see that we're going to see that Am Israel is totally divided. There's no any union. Every tribe for itself, no kind of union in these times. The failure about Eretz Israel, we already saw they couldn't take all the land of Israel. And the failure about the Torah is the idolatry. So idolatry is something very strong in all these times until the end of the first temple. We see the idolatry very present in the Tanakh all these times, right? From now until the end, until the destruction of the first temple, we'll see that the main challenge of Am Israel is idolatry. Always a return to that, always. And we said the question is why? What it's so attractive in idolatry? Why it's so powerful? Because usually we imagine idolatry as very primitive way of worship, right? We're taking an idol and we're saying this is God, and we're trying to worship it. And it looks a little bit silly. Really, they believe that this idol has these powers. This conception of the idolatry is also encouraged, let's say, by some verses of the prophets. The prophets used to mock the idolatry in that way. For example, there is a prophet that says, he's talking about the person that exercise idolatry. They say they take in a piece of wood, they cut, half of it they use to heat the food, and the other cut they made an idol of it and worship it. So it looks funny. I really think that this wood is your idol. So maybe it was part of the fight against idolatry, but we shouldn't assume that so many people for so many generations were so stupid. It's not like they really think or really thought that this kind of idol of this wood has the power of God or any kind of power at all. So we should try to understand why was it so attractive? The second question we should ask, why today we don't feel this urge, this need to go and worship woods and silver and gold, or maybe we do. So we should try to understand what is the point, where it is disappear, and why it may be also relevant for us. So this is a question we have to answer about the idea of idolatry. And let's start from saying that idolatry, it's not, like I said before, it's not something so stupid to believe that a piece of wood is God. We are talking about a faith that there are powers in the nature, the power of fertility, for example, the power of harvest, of bringing a lot of harvest, the power of health and happiness, etc. So there are many powers in the nature, and by taking these powers and, let's say, pressing the right buttons, you can make them work for your favor. You can manipulate, let's say, the power of the nature in order to help you to live better life, or in order to avoid disasters. These powers sometimes they can be mean, they can be good, they can be bad, and you should try to manipulate in a world not only according to the laws of nature, but also according to the laws of the spiritual nature of the world. So this is basically the idea of idolatry, that there are these powers. So these powers can be transferred in some way to objects. And then that when we have the idols. And it's not something so silly because we actually do that ourselves also. In some way, when we say that the holiness is in the Yerushalayim, what we say, that the abstract holiness of Hashem that he created in the world is presenting more in specific place. Or when we say, for example, that the Sefer Torah is holy, what do we say in that? We say that the holiness of the Torah is concentrated in this material object because the Sefer Torah is a skin of an animal in the end of the story, right? So we are saying that there is a possibility that the holiness or the power of Hashem, or the energy of the spirituality of the Torah will be focused or will be downloaded, let's say, to some material object. So it's not something that it's not possible to say. Actually, for example, Sefer HaKuzari, Rabbi Yehuda Halevi in Sefer HaKuzari says that the root of the faith and the root of the revolt, Mary, meaning revolt against Hashem, is one. What does it mean? It says that actually we believe that the holiness of Hashem was in Bet HaMikdash or in the Keruvim, in Aron HaKodesh was on the Aron HaKodesh there was this kind of idols, right? We can say of characters of a boy and a girl that was on the Aron HaKodesh, and we say this is the highest, upmost holiness that exists is this object. So it's very similar. What's the difference? The difference that was the order that believes that was the order of Hashem to do that. But if we don't do that according to the order of Hashem, the same object can transfer to idolatry. Meaning the idolatry is the idea of taking spiritual powers and try to materialize them in some objects. But so the source is these powers. Now it's very easy to believe in this kind of powers. If there is story, for example, about the flag of Mexico. You know how the flag of Mexico is looked like?
Yeah,
There is an eagle. Yes. So what is this eagle? Yeah, it's an eagle, and I don't remember if there's a snake there. Yeah. So what is this eagle? This eagle was the sign when they arrived there. They saw some kind of an eagle. I don't know exactly. Remember exactly the details of the story, and then it was like a sign of a good luck or something like that.
Spanish?
I think the Aztecas or whatever. I don't remember that is a detail, but what I'm trying to say, try to imagine a hunter going to a hunt, and then in the morning he's seeing some kind of eagle in the entrance to his house. And this day was very, very successful. The next day he didn't see the eagle, and it was a bad day. In the third day he again saw the eagle, and then it was also another, again, a successful day. Wow. There's some sign here. So it won't be maybe constant all the days, but you already started to believe the connection between the eagle and the success in the hunting, right? And this kind of beliefs can develop and can after that be inserted in certain kind of beliefs and religions and faith that would be connected to this kind of signs.
It's in a soccer tournament of the year 2010.
Yeah.
Octopus.
Oh yeah, octopus.
Yeah,
But,
the octopus to the water.
I mean, we can see that for.
He sent his arm to the flag of the country that will win the game. So we just know.
And he was right. Okay, so we will start to develop the religion of the octopus. Or, I mean, there are people today that still open the newspaper and look for the astrology. How many times it worked and how many times it didn't work, it doesn't matter. They still believe in that. And it sounds funny, but it's the power of faith. The faith can make you believe in things that are not so real, let's say. Now, we shouldn't underestimate this power because it's something that it motivates humanity for so many years, also to do good things. And also, I mean, there are so many religions. You know that the religious is something that can be dangerous. The religion, something that can be dangerous, but also something that can be very powerful to motivate people to do generosity and donations and help to each other and avoid from doing evil for the power of faith. So the idolatry is some kind of faith, the faith that in the powers of the nature. So they had the god of fertility and the god of parnasa and the god of health and many other, and also they had the bad powers, the god of the storms and the fire, and they all represent some kind of powers in the nature that can act and influence the world. So this is, let's say, the first level of understanding idolatry. It's something that exists all over the world all the time. This like we have the rules of science, we have the rules of the spiritual science, which is a rule of religion. We can assume that everything is lie. I mean, it's not working, it's not true, it's only imagination. We can also believe, and there are some sources of that in Judaism, that there are certain powers in the nature that can be controlled, let's say in the dark side of the spirituality, that God created some kind of leverage, let's say, ways to manipulate the nature in an inappropriate way, which is the power of magic, of black magic, of white magic. I don't know. That maybe, I don't know. I didn't investigate all the kinds of spiritual exercise, training or exercise that exists in the world. I tend to say that everything is a lie because there are two opinions in Judaism about that. If there exist really black powers or not. Rambam is a rational philosopher that says that all is nonsense. It's not allowed to believe in that. There's no such powers. It's only in the imagination of the people. But there are others that used to say that there are powers in the nature that can be controlled in unlegitimate way, which is idolatry. So idolatry has certain powers according to this opinion. I don't have to decide between these two opinions to understand that there is this power of attraction to this kind of beliefs and faith. And we can see also today the power of religion, again, without asking the question which of the religion is the right religion, because we believe is ours, but you can see in other religions what the religion make people do. I'm not talking only about the murderers that can be motivated by religions that we just saw recently. I'm talking also about, for example, the decision of not getting married never in your life, right? It's a very powerful decision that comes from faith. So we can see that the faith can motivate you to take drastic decisions about your life. And we know that there was some kind of ecstasy.
What faith would cause you not to get married?
Christianity, if you are a priest. Catholic.
But-
Yeah, that's what I refer to. Yeah. So I mean, what motivates a person to give up on something so important in our lives?
Yeah.
Right? It's the faith, it's the power of connection to something more, to the spiritual power in the world. And another religions always there's some power, for example, of ecstasy. You know, there's some religions, I know exactly the details in the Islam, that they used to, in certain holidays they used to heat themselves until bleeding from that. I mean, but and they feel elevated and they feel motivated and inspired from this. So it's a power of faith. It can make you do enormous things. I mean, it's tremendous power that exists. And this power of faith was let's say, the source of the root of the idolatry, but I may add 10,000 stronger than what we can, I know it's 10,000 exactly, but much, much stronger than what we know today. And we have several sources to that in our literature, let's say. I'll tell you two stories about Chachamim that Chachamim tells about the story about the power of idolatry, and try to explain a little bit more what is the idea of that. Chachamim said one story is about one of the Rabbanim in the yeshiva. He said he used to teach the student every day, and he said, tomorrow we are going to speak about our friends. Who are our friends? So in the Mishnah in Masechet Sanhedrin, there are mentioned of three kings that don't have part. They didn't have part in the next world. They were so evil that they didn't. Jewish kings, Achav, Menashe, and Yoravam, three of the worst king in our history, that they were so bad, so evil that they don't have part in the next world. You know that we say, Kol Yisrael yesh lahem chelek le'olam haba, right? What does it mean? All Israel has part in the next world, but the Mishnah continues saying apart from, right? All Israel, everybody has apart from. So in the list of apart from is mentioned these three kings, Achav, Yoravam, and Menashe, that were so evil that they don't have part in the next world. And the main sin was idolatry. They were people that were they did other bad stuff, but basically they were dedicated to idolatry. They made everybody make the idolatry. They transformed transform the kingdom of Israel to a kingdom of idolatry. So that was 3 kings. So he said, tomorrow we are going to learn about our friends, meaning about these 3 kings. And then he went home. In the night, he slept, of course, and he dreamt that in his dream, the king Menashe, one of these 3 kings, came to him in the dream. And he told him, are you calling her your friends? Are we your friends? Do you think you are in your level? Tell me, do you know where in Shabbat, when you do a motzi, what part of the bread you should cut first? And he said, I don't know, maybe you tell me. And then he answered him. So it's not very clear what is the idea about this question. Maharal Prague explains that this is a very deep philosophical question, right? It's a question about the creation, about how the creation began. It's a very hard question. How from the infinity of God was created something that has fin and things. I mean, Hashem should reduce himself in order to be able to create something that is apart from him, because before the creation, there was only God. And then he should reduce himself to give space to something that is not God. This is according to Maharal. It doesn't matter right now if it's right, if this is the only explanation to this midrash or not. Anyway, he asked him a question he didn't know the answer. And he said, okay, so if you are so smart and you know so much and you say that we are not in your level, how come you did all this idolatry? How come you were doing all this, what the Bible tells us about you? So Menashe answered to him, according to this midrash of the Talmud, he says, you cannot understand that, because if you were in our generation, you would have lifted the edge of your skirt. You know that the men also used to wear skirt or dress, I don't know, dressed. You would have lifted the edge of your dress in order to run as fast as you can to do the idolatry. I mean, what does it mean? That you wouldn't have resisted. If you had you lived in our generation, you wouldn't have been able to resist the temptation of the idolatry, because the power of the idolatry was so strong until you couldn't resist that. You are not in the level. I mean, we are talking about one of the greatest rabbi in our history. If I'm not mistaken, it was Rav Ashi, one of the greatest person in our history. He wrote the Talmud, but he wouldn't have the power to resist the power of idolatry. So we can understand that it was a very powerful temptation, Yetzer Hara, to do idolatry. And then we have to ask a question. So where did it? Why I don't feel this urge? Why didn't Rav Ashi feel the urge to run and worship the idols? And why I don't feel this urge to run and worship idols? I can see idols and just, it's boring me. Where is this power went to?
What was the philosophy behind it? This would be the key element, just like you had a philosophy of the divine right of kings. So what was it that made them feel that they had to do this?
Yeah, so I will arrive, I think I partly answered that. They believed that there are different powers in the nature, and that there are ways to manipulate this power in your favor. If you are making certain sacrifice, the same like we are doing in many mitzvot, right? Sacrifice, we are doing sacrifice. We say for the sacrifice, Hashem is going to bless us, or we are going to do to make pleasant things to God, right? So it's the same idea. The idea is there are powers in the nature that you can manipulate in your benefit in some ways, and they develop with the years these ways of manipulating nature in their favor, according to this. But maybe and now I'm going to explain a little more what is the power of attraction of that. So, like I said before, Menashe told him you wouldn't have been able to resist, to be against, to reject this temptation. So where did it disappear? And so there is another midrash. The midrash says that Chachamim in the times of the Second Temple. So it's interesting that in the Second Temple they didn't have this problem. They had other problems. They had other problems in the Second Temple, but they didn't have the temptation of idolatry. The closest thing to that was Hellenism, which is, it was idolatry, but not exactly. It was involved with philosophy, and it was more political issue or cultural issue. It wasn't the interpretation of the first temple of the idolatry. And Chachamim said, for example, that the second temple wasn't destroyed for the idolatry. It was destroyed for hate between us, or before the Lashon Hara, etc. So we see that the idolatry wasn't so powerful in the second temple. Where did it disappear? This was exactly the time that it disappeared. Interesting enough, in this time, in Greek, the philosophy started to be developed in what we call the pre-Socrates philosophers. They are more or less the first philosophers. The primitive, let's say, ideas of philosophy were developed in Greek in the times of the Second Temple. So what happened in that time exactly? So according to the Talmud, Chachamim say to Hashem, we cannot deal with this power. You must help us, and they prayed, and they killed the Yetzer Hara of idolatry. That's what the Gemara said, meaning this power disappeared for the prayer of Chachamim that said, we cannot hold it, we cannot handle it, we cannot overcome this power. So easy? So it just prayed and disappeared?
No, it didn't disappear because we today even try to manipulate nature, praying for Geshem and Paul.
Okay, but this is
Yeah,
allowed.
I know, but we are still attempting to manipulate nature, except that we moved it to Hashem.
Well, I think it disappeared because it's not the same power, it's not the same energy like they used to have at that time. Let me finish the story, and then we'll understand what I want to say. So it says, Chachamim saw, I answer that in a second, but continue the story. Chachamim saw it's going well. Okay, Hashem is accepting our prayers. They also prayed that to kill the Yetzer Hara of prohibition relationships, all the what we call sexual sins. And Hashem accepted their tefillot, but then after 3 days they saw there's no one egg in all the land of Israel.
There is no what?
One egg
One
of
egg.
the hens.
Yeah.
The hens stopped doing eggs. Why? Because there's no sex desires, there's no creation of life, there's no reproduction, right? So they understood it's impossible to the world to live without sexual desires. So they said, you know what? We'll just make him blind. We make the Yetzer Hara of sexual relationship, we'll make him blind. What does it mean, blind? It means that usually today, I mean, most of the normal cases, people don't have desires to the family, to their children, or to the sisters or mothers. So it was before. If you think about it, naturally, the closest women to you are these relatives. So why don't we have desire to that? It's like the easiest or the closest thing, and the people that you love already. So where is the sexual aspect of this relationship disappeared? According to Chachamim, it disappeared in the time. In the past, it was very common. I mean, in the past, I'm talking about 3,000-4,000 years ago. It was very common to marry inside the family, in the closest family, and this we don't have today. I mean, there are some very, very exceptional cases, but usually it's not something that people feel. So it's according to Chachamim, though, they could reduce the power of sexual desires to the close family. This is not existing anymore. Anyway, what we learn from that, of course, that the desire of sex, it's a positive thing in its nature when it's handled in the right way, right? When it's done in the right way, it's a positive power because we cannot exist without that. The humanity and all the nature wouldn't exist without that. So it's basic. What's about the power of idolatry? What is, if the sexual desire has good aspect and bad aspect, what is the good aspect of the idolatry, of the Yetzer Hara of the idolatry? So Chachamim, this Midrash said that in the moment they killed the Yetzer Hara of idolatry, there was a lion of fire that went out from Kodesh HaKodashim. Kodesh HaKodashim, the holiest place, there was a line of fire that went away. What does it mean? When they killed the power of idolatry, they also killed the power of the faith. It's the same power, like we said before. If we have desire to eat and we have desire to sex, there are a more elevated desire, the desire to connect with Hashem, with something that is unnatural, spiritual, more elevated than our life. This is the strongest desire that we used to have. And this desire was reduced to minimum. And that is the power of the idolatry, of this line of fire from Bet HaMikdash, meaning that we lost the power of faith. And this is when we start philosophy. The philosophy is a replacement to faith. When you have a strong faith, you don't need the philosophy. You just connected to Hashem. You don't need to explain yourself the world and the creation and the morality and ethics because it comes from your faith. But since we don't have that, we have to develop a replacement to that, which is a philosophy. And this is the exact time when the prophecy ceased to exist. There's no prophecy anymore. Why? Because prophecy is the highest level of faith. You are so connected to Hashem, you can hear him directly, or you can hear his messages directly. Prophecy is not about telling the future. Prophecy is about connecting to Hashem. So, for example, according to Ramban, the reward to Avraham Avinu for the Brit Milah was that Hashem was with him. It says, "Vayar Hashem elav petach ha'ol, vayar Hashem elav, hu yoshev petach ha'ol kechom hayom." In the beginning of Parashat Vayera, Vayera Hashem el Avraham be'elonem mamre hu yoshev petach ha'ol kechom. That is the verse, right? So Hashem revealed to him. I think we talked about it once. Revealed to him for what? He didn't say anything. Hashem revealed to Avraham, and then he saw the three angels to visit the sick. And Ramban say it was the connection with Hashem, being with Hashem, was the biggest reward of Avraham for doing Brit Milah in the former parasha. It wasn't a visit of the sick. It was the purpose of everything, to be connected to Hashem. So we used to have this Yetzer Hara. So it always comes good and bad together. You cannot say, well, I have Yetzer Hara, I have Yetzer Hatov to connect to Hashem, and I don't have the temptation to Avodah Zarah. It's come together. So this strong, powerful desire of connecting with Hashem was reduced to a minimum that enable us to have some kind of faith, some kind of connection. So we still have sometimes religious feelings, and we feel, like I said before, the religion can motivate people to do many kind of things. It's still a very powerful thing that exists in the world, but it's not like it was in the past. That's what Menashe told Rav Ashi. You cannot imagine the power of idolatry. You cannot imagine the power of the attraction of being elevated in such a way. It's like the ecstasies that you see, and the people arrived, I don't know, with drugs, with, I don't know, I can't even describe it. This kind of ecstasies that people used to get from being in Bet HaMikdash, from prophecy. There are descriptions of the prophecies of the prophets in when we arrive to the next book in the Bible, how there were groups of prophets that used to go together and live together, like that were to dedicate their life. Oh, it doesn't work then. Oh, okay. I saved the computer. That's it isn't connected to the electricity. Okay, so this is the connection, right? The connection to electricity of faith. That was the idea of idolatry. So we will see that during the book, always they're going back to that, always they're going back to that. It's like we know today that people go back to sins, even though they know it's bad to them, because it's stronger than us. It's stronger. I mean, the temptations that we have around other things are so strong that we are going to back, even though we know it's bad. So again, when we see in the books of Shoftim, and then after that in Melachim, that Am Yisrael returned once and once again to the idolatry because it was so powerful and so energetic. It's the power of faith. It's the power of connection with Hashem, which is what makes you human being, not animal. I mean, what makes you more elevated from the animal is this soul that we have in ourselves, this soul that desires so much to connect with its creator, which is Hashem. So we should have that in mind while reading the Bible. It's so easy to get inside the mood of criticizing. Now, how could they do that? Well, it's so stupid. Didn't you learn from the last time? Didn't you see what's happening? Now transfer it to our lives. Why are you again and again doing these mistakes? Don't you know it's bad to you? Yeah, but it's stronger than me. Why do you eat this garbage? You know it's hurting your health. Why are you smoking? It's making you bad. No, it's stronger than me. This is the same power, but much, much stronger. And that's the reason it's so present during the Tanakh. We still say, after all of that, we still say that the power of idolatry didn't disappear totally from the world, as the same as the power of faith didn't disappear totally from the world. It still exists. It can motivate us to do good and to do bad. We should try to develop it and to use it in the positive way, but also be careful from the negative aspects of the faith. Okay, anyway, this was a debt of the last time. Now, finally, we're going to start chapter 3. And we also have a debt here. So chapter 3, actually, the 6 verses continue chapter 2. If you remember, chapter 2 was about the cycle of the Sefer Shoftim, of the sin, punishment, tshuva, repentance, salvation, and calm. Right? This is the circle. And so completing that, in the beginning of chapter 3, before the actual stories, there is a description of the Goim. Who were the Goim that were left in the land of Israel? So as the verse says, these are the nations that God left in order to test the Israelites who had not known any of the wars of Canaan. And that is a question that we ask. Why the Goim were left? Because Am Israel didn't took them out, right? No, the Torah said at least 4 different reasons why Hashem did that the Goim will be left in the land of Israel. If you remember, we saw in the first chapter that Yehuda could win in the war against the Goim, the nations of the mountain, but couldn't from the valley. In the mountain, Hashem was with him. So we can assume that in the valley, Hashem wasn't with him, with Yehuda. So we assume that Hashem wanted them to stay. And it's actually saying in the Torah. Hashem left the Goim in purpose. So,
Goyim is anyone not Jewish?
yeah, Goyim, we are talking about the nations that were in the land of Israel, the Gentiles that were in the land of Israel. So they were left them by Hashem. So in the Torah, there are mentioned several reasons. Here it's mentioned some of them. It says, it was in order to test the Israelim. What does it mean to test? To test their faith, to make them deal with other faiths, so to see if they can be loyal to Hashem. And they failed in this test. So this is one reason that is mentioned here. And then it continues saying, so that succeeding generation, it's written? Yeah, succeeding generation of Israelim might be made to experience war, but only those who had not known the former wars. So this is another reason. They should experience war. Why should they? It's a little bit strange reason. I just read the verses until the end, and then I return to answer that. And then I say, which are these Goyim? So the 5 principles of the Plishtim. The Plishtim were 5 different cities that were in the west, south of Israel, where today is Gaza, Ashkelon, Ashdod. All this were the lands of the Plishtim. They were nations that came in the times of Abraham, more or less, from the son of Greece and Greece and Crete. What's the name of this island? Crete? Yeah, Crete and Greece, in these places, they called Goyei Hayam, the Gentiles of the sea. So they came to the west of Israel and they started being there. And after that, there were some waves of immigration to Israel. This all called Plishtim. The word Plishtim, today Palestinians, the real meaning of that is Polshim, invaders. People who came from outside and invaded the land of Israel. How funny it may sound, right? So the Plishtim, Palestinians, are the invaders to the land of Israel from the sea nations. So these are one of the nations that stayed there. So all the Plishtim and all the Knaanim, these are the original inhabitants of the land of Israel, the Knaanim. Sidonim, and Chivim, who inhabited in the hill country of the Lebanon from Mount Baal Hermon to Levo Hamat. And then it continues again, it returning to the same idea. This served as a means of testing Israel, to learn whether they would obey the commandments that God has enjoined upon their ancestors through Moshe. So this is again the reason that we said before, to test Am Israel.
So we're still being tested.
Yeah, it's still being tested. No, but okay. I will explain. The Israelim settled among the Knaanim, Chittim. Now here we see a total opposite of what we saw before. Until now, we said, Am Israel took the land of Israel, and some Goyim, some Gentiles were left and lived among Israel. Here we see the other side. No, the Israelim were among the other nations. Right? Like they didn't do what they have to do, they became the minority, or those who were controlled by others. So the Israelim settled among the Knaani, Hitti, Amori, Perizi, Chivi, and Yevusi. They took the daughters to wife and gave their own daughters to their sons, and they worshipped their gods. So again, we talked about this connection between mixed marriage and cultural influence, right? So this was, okay, anyway, returning to the question I asked, why Hashem left the Goyim? So in the Torah it mentioned another reason that we didn't say here. Hashem didn't want the land to be abandoned. If they would have killed everybody at once, one time, most of the land would be left abandoned, and then it's much harder to reestablish or to rehabitate the land. You know that when the Jews returned to the land of Israel in the end of 18th century, beginning of the 19th century, it was very hard to make it again possible to live there. There were sickness and, how do you say, bitzot, mud, lakes, and it was impossible to live there. What? Swamps. Right? It was impossible to make the land, to rehabilitate the land. It was a very, very hard mission. Many people died in that mission. It was very hard. So Hashem didn't want the land to be abandoned, so he did it gradually. But again, and then we came to the other reason, to test Am Israel. So it's not like, okay, I will give you everything free, I will make your life easy, and then you will be my nation. No, there is challenges, there is things that you have to deal in order to develop your faith. And this is one of the reasons. There are other cultures, there are other ideologies, there are other kind of faith. You should try to deal with that and find in yourself the power to be really a believer, to be a real believer. So this is, we can say, the test. And there is another reason that is mentioned, like we said before, is just the failure. The reason they stay there, because Am Israel failed in defeating them, in taking them out. These reasons are not contradiction. It can be all of them together. It can be for not abandoning the land, don't make the land abandoned, in order to test Am Israel, and also because of the failure. The only reason that it's not very clear is the one is mentioned here. What does it mean? In order to teach Am Israel war. ללמד בני ישראל, how it says in Hebrew, ללמדה מלחמה. To teach them, here we translated that made to experience war. It doesn't say experience war, it says to teach war. ללמדה מלחמה. That's what it says in Hebrew. Does it say other translations there in this book? In the other book, in the verse 2. You see? Okay, never mind. So what does it mean? It looks like, because it's strange. So you leave the Goyim in order that to achieve that Am Israel will know how to make wars, to teach them to make wars. So I have an idea. Don't leave the Goyim, they wouldn't need any war, right? So you said you leave them in order to teach them war, so in order to they can fight against the Goyim. So just don't leave the Goyim. Right? It's not, I mean, I understand why if there are Goyim, there are nations, there are enemies, so we need to learn how to make wars, right? But you don't leave them in order to teach us to make war. I mean, it's just, doesn't make any sense as a reason. I mean, I understand why I need to learn that if there are Goyim, but I don't want to leave them in order to learn that. So, what I think about that, it's something that is hard to say, and we talked about it in the beginning of the war that started in Israel recently. But war, of course, is a negative thing. One of the worst things that human being has done in the history is wars, right? And some of the most cruel actions that were made by human were made during war. And it looked like in wars, people just forgot any kind of limits of morality, of ethics. They are just losing the wars. What? Yeah. I mean, they're just losing their head and the morality and the values and the ethics, and they can do horrible, normal people. Normal people, when they're in situations of war, they can do horrible things. This is for one side. For the other side, if we can say some positive aspects of war, is that it make a nation find in itself powers that usually in normal times they wouldn't have found these powers. And the history is many times, unfortunately, developed by war. I'm talking about the basic, let's say, science development that were made during wars is huge.
Yeah.
The necessity of resolving problems that the war put in front of people made the science make special efforts, and not only in times of war, also, for example, the Cold War and the run to the space was the motivation or the cause to so many developments, scientific development that were thanks to the military efforts of both sides, right? So we can say that war make humanity find special powers in itself. And these efforts, this brings you to the next level. What would have been usually during generation, sometimes in a war, it's a matter of a year or two to develop something new. But not only in the scientific aspect, I'm talking also about the culture and the spirit of a nation. When there is a war, the nation found in itself some kind of powers that usually are not exist. We can see that about Am Israel, for example, that the spirit of union usually, unfortunately, comes during wars. And finding our connections and the meaning of life is much more powerful when we have a war. Again, unfortunately, we would have preferred not having wars. And we would have preferred to find ourselves in the union and all the things, the values and the science development in a normal, calm way. But sometimes this is exactly the way Hashem is managing the world. It's the question, the general question of the existence of evil in the world. Many times you ask yourself, why Hashem did evil in the world? And one of the explanation, or one of the reasons, is that the evil make the good develop in a faster or stronger way. In order to be able to overcome and to win the evil, the good must make much more efforts. So there is also a reason that we need these conflicts with other nations in order to be able to find in ourselves all the energy and the power and the things that there are in us that usually we are not seeing. So with Hashem, we hope we won't need that anymore, and the war is going to be over. And as we see in the prophet, that the real aspiration of Am Israel is peace. We want, and we say every day in the Tefillah 3 times a day, Birkat Hamazon, etc. We eager for peace. We want peace. But we should understand that as long as there are wars, there is some aspect that is positive about wars. So Hashem, during the history, left this goyim and these conflicts in the land of Israel with Am Israel in order to help us to find some powers that usually in other circumstances we wouldn't have been able to find. So again, it's not that I'm supporting wars.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that once we have wars, there are also positive aspects in that. Yeah.
There is a theory that you can't have peace without war.
Yeah.
Might be a bit of a cynical theory.
No, it's true also. It's another explanation that says here. The fact that we have sometimes wars prevents bigger wars. The fact, for example, that we have to fight against Hamas may, I'm not sure, but may prevent a fight against Iran. So
That's what they're trying to do right now.
if you teach people to make war, maybe there's not going to be a need to have war, right? So this is one of also the explanation for that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi. I have a quick question.
Yeah,
When we're talking about idolatry, I have to wonder over the ages, if mankind simply needs objectivity, they have to have an explanation. And without an explanation, mankind invents one.
yeah,
So now we have a telescope that's 1,000,000 miles from Earth,
yeah,
and it still hasn't found any other life as
yeah.
we know it on Earth. To what extent have we just been lucky?
I don't know. You're asking me if there are other lives outside there?
Well, no, to what extent, for example, I worked for a research organization.
Yeah,
In forestry, and it brought together 200 researchers from 15 different disciplines. And without an explanation in forestry, the engineers got to give their opinions. as to why things were the way they were in forestry, and all that. The engineers did it, 'cause they were the only one. Until we brought together these 15 disciplines and studied it from 15 different directions over 14 years and $83 million.
Oh, wow.
And they were able to go back at the end to the engineers and say, you were right, but for the wrong reasons. And on this, you were totally wrong, nothing to do with that. This is the reason. And so, and they were able to prove it.
Mhm.
So I'll throw this out to you. I don't believe this, but the Bible is at this level and the telescope is at that level, you know, at 1,000,000 miles while we're dealing with
Yeah.
0 miles. And
Yeah.
it's quite a difference.
No, so that was the reason that what I said before, between the two opinions, those who are saying that there is real powers in idolatry and those who say there's no real power, only imagination, I tend to the second one that says it's only imagination, because once the science develop, we find more and more answers
Right.
to things that were unknown before, that were mystery, and so they related that to some unnatural power. So we
Right.
find that most of the things can be explained, but still, I mean, the biggest secret of existence cannot be answered in scientific way. The big secret of
Yes, I
the
know.
point of creation,
Yeah.
that cannot be explained, I think, by science. And this is also would remind the point of faith.
We used to think we were one galaxy. Now we find out there are thousands.
Yeah.
Millions,
Millions of galaxies.
possibly billions.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay.
Infinite.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
let's hope it